Okay, Suzuka time, because it's an iconic track and weather always seems to be a factor. High-speed circuit, that is certainly challenging, but a favorite among the drivers. What type of racing can we expect? To see either one of you want to take this one? Because the next question is an easy one, let me tell you.
Have you guys looked at the weather forecast yet? I've
I
seen
haven't.
a
You're ahead
little
of
bit
me.
of rain. My hope
Give it time.
is that we're not sitting for 2.5 hours like we
Yeah.
did last year, waiting for the race to start, and then also going through the race with the uncertainty of what the outcome may or may not be. But Katie, Suzuka is it's a beautiful track to watch the drivers navigate the S's at the start as they go uphill. It has high speed. It has some of the most memorable corners. It looks great on TV. There's so much there. It's such an exciting weekend. I was telling you guys prior to the pod here, I'm a night owl, so it falls within a window. I love being able to watch that 1 a.m. race, 1 a.m. qualification. So I'm all in. I love it.
So this race is an interesting one from a UK perspective, because as you guys know, a lot of European fans, or a lot of, I say a lot of European fans, a lot of European fans who are on Twitter seem to complain at the moment that the US has 3 races.
We know that all the schedules geared around you Europeans in your timeline.
Exactly. This is one of the rare ones where, I feel like I have more of an American fan experience, because this one is an early start for us. And actually growing up, this used to be one of my favorite races, because for all the reasons Tyler mentioned, Suzuka is an incredible circuit, but it was always 6 or 7 in the morning. And because it used to be the penultimate round, or it used to be at that end of the calendar, there was usually something riding on it in terms of the championship. And I remember getting up when I was about 10 to watch Schumacher win in 2000. And it's just, it felt a lot more special, not just because of the early wake up, but as a kid, you kind of remember those a lot more. I think Suzuka, I'm so gutted that Suzuka is kind of this far up the calendar now. It makes sense, I guess, from a logistical point of view, but there was always so much riding on it before when it was towards the end. So that's my only criticism of it. And it's not really of Suzuka. It's more just of the scheduling, but it's an amazing place and definite bucket list circuit.
Are you saying that are you saying there's nothing riding on this one?
Well, sorry, but Max can't win here, so, he can win the race. He can't win the championship here. Mathematically, and my point being, like, at this point we know Max is going to win it, right? Whereas if it's penultimate race or final race, it was. But then again, we didn't always get title deciders. So I'm basing it on one memory of Schumacher rather than a yearly thing.
Welcome to the life of an American Formula One fan, of having to set the alarm for 5:55 a.m.
I don't know,
so you can make it out to the couch by 6.
6 a.m. is pretty early. I mean, I know it's 1 a.m. in the US, give or take a few hours, but then 6, like, at least ours are usually around 8 or 9 a.m. That gives you a little bit more time to snooze. 6 a.m.
This one's tough. And because of the time of year now, the sun is barely up at that point. So, it's easy to be up when the sun's up, isn't it? But when it's dark outside, I'm not saying, Crimea River, everyone's here thinking this English guy can't deal with 1 or 2 early starts, but, it is tough. And I'm going to be doing that this weekend, guys. So please do think of me, poor Nate.
We'll send you a
text. You said it yourself. Okay, I can't believe I'm even asking this question. So just, we'll just breeze straight through it. Tyler, can Max and Red Bull bounce back this weekend?
Yes, I fully expect them to. Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. We'll move on. Do we need to? Do we need to say anything else?
No.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward, but I think that's what's fascinating about this last week, is that a lot of people messaged me, maybe who did watch the race or didn't, and were suddenly like, so wait, are Red Bull not good anymore? And you had to say no. Basically Lawrence would do a better job of explaining this, but Singapore, the ride height, they couldn't ride the car as aggressively as they usually do. That impacted the performance, and with Ferrari, Mercedes, etc., being a bit stronger, it balanced out in the way we saw. And I think going back to Suzuka, and you mentioned it earlier, Katie, or Tyler, I think maybe both of you did, that Max actually had some pretty good pace in the race. It's just, he still came through to finish 5th. So that Red Bull, I think, is still a bit of a beast. But yeah, sorry, I ruined Tyler's snappy response. But just for anyone listening who wondered why, it was a pretty big anomaly. And I'd love us to be wrong. It'd be great, because that was one of the best races of the year.
But to be fair, and as dominant as he's been, it's great for storylines, right? It's nice to have like a little mix up here and a bright spot for Ferrari to be able to hold on to, and just just some kind of parity that can be track specific. And so Suzuka obviously presents its own kind of challenges, different than Singapore. As we look at Ferrari, do you guys feel like they could threaten to go back to back? They are slowly catching Mercedes for P2 in the Constructors' Championship.
For Ferrari, I expect to be there. It seems like Mercedes has take Red Bull out of the equation, because you're on Twitter, you're on Reddit, you're on these forums. This is a phenomenal season if you take Red Bull out of the equation. But Mercedes has such a consistent car, it feels like, but their highs sometimes aren't as high as where Ferrari can hit. So it remains, if Ferrari can build on their momentum, and that's always, it feels like a big if. With Ferrari, consistency. Mercedes is consistent. Ferrari is wildly inconsistent, but they can have pace. So there's a chance. I mean, sure, it can always happen. But I think the biggest question for Ferrari would be, if they're going to go back to back, who would it be? Would it be Leclerc that wins, or would it be Sainz that wins? Sainz is operating at and I'm sure I had mentioned last year the disappointment he had in that race going out in the first lap. That was the third time, if you guys remember last year, that he had not made it to lap number 2. That was probably the lowest point, I would say, for Sainz, maybe in his F1 career. So I think he's going to go into this weekend oozing with confidence. That's going to be great to watch within Ferrari. And did you guys see already with the garage setup that they forgot to put one? It was 2 Sainz garages. So that's got to be a great omen going into the weekend.
Been fixed. They have remedied the mistake.
Imagine
Charles
if you're
Leclerc does have a
and
spot.
seeing that, you're like, hang on a sec, I was the golden boy 3 races ago. Now I don't even have a garage.
Do you remember in Hard Knocks when the player went to badge in and he couldn't get into the team facility?
Is that Jets player?
Is that how Leclerc felt when he went and he showed up? And okay, so they've cloned Carlos and they're going to run 2 Carloses.
The rise and fall so quick. No, I'm just kidding. It's been remedied. Carlos Sainz has one, and Charles Leclerc was right next to him, so his face has been plastered, thankfully. But can't imagine that blunder when it was pointed out to whoever was putting this signage up. How embarrassed they probably felt.
How did it get up? Somebody had to, and
I don't know.
Where's your quality control to be like, those are the same guys.
Also, the fact that they have 2 is impressive.
Yeah. When you're working on it and it's right in front of you, I don't think you'd have seen the other one. So someone else passing needed to be the person to say, guys, you've got 2 signs here. The guys putting up, I feel bad for, because they would have just had the, whatever signs they were given.
I just saw what 2 signs. I saw what you did there.
Well,
maybe it's a sign.
Definitely not intentional, but I'll take it. I'll take it if you want to think it. I'm that smart.
Okay.
That's our signs to move on. Katie, go ahead.
Nice.
Yeah, Tyler, before you get us off derailed for the rest of the pod, I'm going to get us back on track, and that is going to be with Mercedes. Obviously, you're happy that Lewis Hamilton, one of your cars, finishes P3, but by all accounts, we thought it was going to be George Russell on the podium. Do you feel like Mercedes can bounce back? George Russell in particular, Nate, after what was a really heartbreaking weekend for him.
Yeah, and I think the pressure will be on him, and a lot of focus will be on him for that reason. He was really devastated by that. There was the interview he did afterwards to Sky. He was choking back tears, when he was talking, which we saw when he on a couple of occasions, when he nearly won for Mercedes on his first race, when he got points for Williams. So George is a guy who he wears his emotions on his sleeve like that quite a lot, and he doesn't try and hide when he's upset. It'll be a really good test of his mental fortitude, I think, because that was it was such a tiny mistake, but it had such a big consequence. But it's easily the kind of thing you can overthink, and you can really it's like a thread. When you got a thread hanging out of your jumper, you can keep pulling at it. And he's lucky that we're almost going immediately back racing. He hasn't got too much time to dwell on it. Sometimes I've heard drivers say the worst time you can make a mistake like that costs you a podium is before the summer break, because you have 4 weeks just to sit and think about it and ruminate on it. He's right back in the car on Friday for practice, and you'll think he'll be able to get that out of his head. But yeah, I think Mercedes will be good. I mean, they've been in pretty good shape all year in terms of that fight for second. They've not always been the second quickest team, but they've always been there or thereabouts. And I think what we're seeing from Mercedes is that those 2 guys are performing on such a good level. I would like to throw something out there just very quickly. Do you think the outcome of that race is different if Lewis, and I asked the same question after Leclerc and Sainz were fighting in Monza, would they have been allowed to if it was the other way around? This one, if Lewis was ahead of Russell at the end, and the fight was the same, do you think Lewis gets past? Do you think Lewis wins the race? Because I have a feeling, even if Mercedes don't want to admit it, do you want the guy there who's won 103 races, or do you want the guy there who's won one? I think it was experience just telling out, especially when Russell nearly got past Norris. I think that Lewis may have got that move done. Mm-hmm. Obviously a hypothetical, but I just want to throw it out there, create some chaos before we move on.
No, I think that is one of the biggest things. So I want to know the team dynamic right now at Mercedes, because we all know how badly Lewis Hamilton wants to win again, wants to win another race. And he has to be sitting there saying, that was me. I make that pass on Lando, and then I'm able to go get Carlos and win the race and be back on the top of the podium. So I think it's interesting. I think it bears mentioning, how does Mercedes deal with that dynamic? I saw Toto's not going to be in Japan for the race this weekend, but Lewis has to be. There's that impatience. He wants to win. He's a champion. Yeah. So there's got to be something going on there.
And I think to Lewis's credit as well, I was actually quite surprised, because we don't always hear from Lewis him saying, he'll admit when he's made, he's maybe not raced as well as he could. But on Sunday, he said, if I'd been on pole, I could have won the race. So he said, I've just got to improve on Saturdays, which is remarkable for a few reasons. One, he's one of the best qualifiers we've ever seen. But also it was kind of a soft admission that had he qualified better, he could have been ahead of Russell at the end, and then he could have challenged for the win. At no point did he say the team should have let me past. I think he knew the reason George was ahead of me was because up until that moment, George had done the better job. And that, to Tyler's point, is where that dynamic's interesting, because Russell has really, since the start of last season, really has moved his level up so much higher than we thought he would, or at least quickly. He's done it so quicker than we thought he would. But yeah, Lewis winning a race would still be, I think, on most people's bucket list of things they want to see one more time. Mm-hmm. Lewis winning a race, I think, it's just because of how Abu Dhabi went in 2021, and yeah, it would have been pretty amazing if he'd come through and won it there, but not to take anything away from Sainz, because fully deserved.
I will say, though, I thought he played it pretty calmly when he was behind Russell. I mean, there was one radio message where he said George needs to pick up the pace. Obviously, Lewis's tires were in a better situation than George's were. But where my mind went was George just knowing he was back there and he was closing in. And that George knows, as a 7-time world champion, he's going to be, even if he can't hear the radio messages and has no idea what Lewis is saying to his race engineer, that he's going to be gunning to want to pass. And so I think the added pressure of knowing I've got to try to overtake Lando, but then I've also got my own teammate who I'm holding up. I think that pressure kind of weighs on your mentality a little bit. Who knows if that then ended up in a slight mistake that puts you in the wall, and then ultimately your day is done. I thought that could have been a factor.
Confidence is a fickle thing as well. Confidence, it's a fine line, and it'll be interesting to watch Russell. And like you said, Nate, how gutted he was, and knowing what he left on the table, how he bounces back from that.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.